Paranormal True Story Number 1. The Basement Entity.
I moved 2 months ago to an old house built in 1914. I lived alone with a couple of cats. Since moving in, I've had weird experiences that I can't explain. To begin, one night I woke up feeling uneasy but wasn't sure why. I went to the bathroom, then I headed to the kitchen for a drink. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. All the pantry doors were open. Some were slightly open while others were wide open. Now, I knew I didn't leave them that way before going to bed, as I like to keep things neat and I always close the doors. A couple of weeks later, I was in my home office. There was no TV on or music, just my work computer. It was pretty quiet. Then out of nowhere, my dryer buzzer went off. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I remembered I hadn't been in the basement for at least 3 days, and I didn't do any laundry. The dryer goes off only after it's done with its cycle. It kept going off every few minutes. I sat there in my office staring at the door, just listening to it for about 20 minutes. I knew no one else was in the house, and both my cats were upstairs. I started feeling uneasy, but I forced myself to ignore it. It finally stopped for good. The next day, I was still thinking about it, and I finally decided to go downstairs to the basement, and to my shock and horror, the washer and the dryer were not even plugged in yet. The feeling I felt at that moment, seeing this while standing alone in the dark basement, is something I can't explain. About 2 weeks later, while I was working in my office, I heard a noise from the front of the house. I got up and I walked to the living room. I was curious as to what that noise was when I noticed something strange. I saw that my attic door was open about 6 inches. That door is always closed and latched, and I hadn't touched it. Trying not to think about it too much, I pushed it shut and made sure it was locked in place and went back to my desk. Not even 15 minutes later, I heard another noise. I felt chills go down my spine as I walked to the living room, and sure enough, the attic door was open again, just like before. I just stared at it petrified. There was no reason for it to open on its own, especially not twice in a row. I closed it a second time. There was no wind or draft that was going through the house to have opened the attic door, especially when it was latched shut. My landlord is extremely friendly, so I asked him about the history of the house. He said no one has ever passed away in the house. It was his family's, and he inherited it. He also told me that no previous tenant has ever mentioned anything strange or paranormal. At that point, I was hoping I was imagining it all. I'm not in total fear, but I do know that I'm not alone.
Paranormal, Scary, True Story Number 2. The Unseen Entity.
I've had some strange experiences before, but nothing like what happened in our new home. I moved in at the end of October, but my wife, kids, and pets didn't join me until the end of December. I spent many nights alone in the empty house. We started by removing all the carpet and painting the walls before we moved our things from the old house. At first, I set up my air mattress in the living room. When we started taking out the carpet, I moved upstairs into the bedroom. My wife and I would share, and that's when strange things began to happen. In my first night in that room, I woke up suddenly hearing something moving quickly around me. Even though my eyesight isn't great, I thought I saw a shadowy figure run by from the corner of my eye. Some nights, I feel like someone was watching me. A few weeks later, I heard a light turning on and off, and sure enough, the bathroom light was doing it by itself. That's when I moved my air mattress downstairs. I told my wife about these events, but she didn't take it seriously. Then nothing happened for about a week. So, I thought it was just me being paranoid. That's when I decided to move my air mattress back upstairs to my bedroom. Then, in the middle of the night, it felt like something jumped into my bed with me and snuggled right next to me. At that moment, my fan turned off by itself. It was quiet and pitch black, and I could feel something behind me. I quickly jumped off the air mattress and turned on the bedroom light. Nothing was there. At that point, I was scared to sleep without several lights on, and I felt safer with the bedroom door locked. I was scared, and I prayed for protection. Nothing really happened after that, just some soft, strange movements. A few months later, my son moved in early, which was nice. I hadn't told him about the strange things I experienced. We also brought our cats. We started moving in some basic things, but the house wasn't fully painted yet, and my wife was still living in the other house. One day before school started, my son was using a powered movie theater seat, and our cat Hopper got her tail stuck in it. My son called me at work, so I rushed home. When I got there, I ended up breaking the chair while trying to free her tail. The poor cat's tail was broken in several spots. I don't know if this is connected with the paranormal events that are going on. The last thing that happened was while I was laying down in bed, our cat jumped in bed with me and laid next to me, purring. I started to doze off to sleep, but then the most scariest thing happened. I remembered that our cat doesn't purr. She never has. When I realized this, my body went cold and stiff. I slowly reached over to touch the cat in the dark. I said, "Hopper, is that you?" It then abruptly stopped purring. I laid my hand on it, and it felt ice cold and limp. I screamed and jumped out of the bed, nearly falling down. When I turned on the light, there was nothing there at all. This was the last occurrence, and I know there's more to come. I pray and I hope that these hauntings come to an end.
Paranormal, scary, true story number 3. The cemetery.
This happened around the middle or end of 1998 in a cemetery in Richmond, Texas. This cemetery is considered one of the scariest around the area. It started as a burial ground, then became a mass grave for soldiers during the Civil War. It was also connected to some bad activities around that time. My sister Rachel has always been interested in creepy things. This caused some issues for her because she was raised by our great-grandparents who are very religious. She moved to Richmond. In her new home, there was a creepy basement room with dirt on the floor. The previous owner, an old man, had passed away in the house. Everything looked dark, like the walls had been burnt. So there was already a weird vibe in the house. Rachel, my sister, was feeling down because of life struggles and money problems. As a kind of escape, she started going on ghost hunts with her friends and dabbling in the paranormal. They often went to Greenwood Cemetery. It was like a safe place for Rachel, in a weird way. She would go there at midnight with her dog, Logan, who was still alive and a great dog. They didn't experience anything too scary, just some weird noises now and then. Then one night, it all changed. She went with her friends and things got really wild. The first time they went, they took lots of pictures. Then one of them went up to a light pole and said, "If there's someone here, please knock back." So her friend knocked on the pole, but nothing happened. A little while later, they heard 2 really loud knocks. They turned around and looked, but didn't see anything. Then suddenly something made them turn their heads towards a gravel road on the other side of the fence. They said just as they turned their heads, they saw 2 dark shapes running down the road. But these things didn't make any noise and seemed like misty clouds. They felt frozen, unable to move, until the shadows had completely left their sight. They hurried out of there, running back to the car for a whole mile. Later, Rachel looked into it and found out that some others had also seen these shadows running down the road. The pictures they took were packed with colorful orbs of all sizes. After some time, they gathered courage to return to the cemetery and went to the scariest part of the cemetery. They were talking about how the place wasn't as scary as they thought it would be. They wanted to see if they could get a reaction because nothing scary had happened yet. And then, out of nowhere, they heard the loudest scream coming from close by. They said it sounded like a woman that was petrified and being tormented. They decided to leave again and headed back to their cars. They sat there for a bit and talked about what had just happened. When one of Rachel's friends had a cat toy laser, they started playing with it while sitting in the car. While her friend was playing with the light, these glowing lights appeared in the trees. Rachel noticed they formed a pattern. It was white lights that were followed by a deep red one. They were not flashlights or made by people. That's when the chain link fence started shaking. They drove off as fast as they could. When they got back home, everything seemed fine. Until they found there was something strange in their closet, and often heard scratching and growling sounds coming from inside. After their experience at Greenwood Cemetery, Logan, the dog, always seemed scared in the house. Also, doors in the basement would open by themselves, especially the one near the dirt room. There often was stomping sounds coming from different rooms, especially when someone was alone. People would hear their names being called while they showered, especially Rachel. At one point, she even heard someone in the restroom with her. I think whatever it was attached itself to Rachel the most because of her dark emotions, and this really fueled the entity. There was just one time when she was alone at night. During a power outage, she turned and saw a shapeless dark shadow moving over the furniture and drifting down the hallway. It was headed straight for her. She grabbed Logan and sat on the porch for hours until the others came home. The house was also rented to a guy before them, but he also quickly moved out, most likely because of strange occurrences that also took place. Soon after these occurrences, Rachel found her faith in Jesus Christ and turned her life around. It seems like this kept away any darkness that might still be lingering around her.
Hello there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the scariest stories that I've ever come by. I dig deep for only the scariest and the most truest paranormal stories that I'm certain will petrify you. Okay, my friends, now let's begin.
True, scary, paranormal story number 1. The Horned Creature.
Hi, I was born in 1983. Every summer I would visit my aunt's farm in South Wales. I was out in the countryside that had many acres of land with fields, forests, and streams. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had already spent a couple of summers there, and I knew the land quite well. I would spend 4 to 6 weeks there at a time. Because I was comfortable around the grounds, I never felt worried about exploring on my own. I would be hanging around the hay bales in the barn, or riding my mountain bike around the fields, or just generally looking around to see what I could find. But one day, it was musky and foggy outside, and also eerily silent. I was in the grassy fields next to the farmhouse. I wasn't doing anything exciting. To be honest, I can't even remember what I was doing there. Suddenly, I started hearing my name being called as clear as day. Michael, Michael, Mike. I looked around and I couldn't see anyone. Another nephew of my aunt, whose name was Nick, also lived on the farm. He's older than me, and he would always enjoy playing tricks on me whenever he got the chance. I thought it was him. I heard the voice calling out to me again. It was actually said in a manner that didn't sound panicked or menacing, but just trying to get my attention. I looked around and noticed, off in the distance, there was a horse stall, and I could see a person inside of it, calling to me and waving their arms above their head, as you would expect when someone is trying to get your attention. "Nick, what are you doing in there?" I shouted as I started to walk towards the stall. I thought it must have been him, but from where I was standing, it didn't really look like him. It was really weird because whoever it was appeared to have horns on top of their head that curved backwards. I was quite far though, so I thought that Nick might have had a stupid hat on or something. I continued to walk closer, and as I did, the figure in the stalls seemed to fade. When I got there to the stall, it was completely empty. There was only one way a person could have gotten out, and that was directly in front of me. Not only that the horse stall was in the middle of a large field and there was nowhere they could hide, but someone had definitely been there calling out to me and waving. They had a pair of horns on their head, and I definitely saw them fading as I approached. I ran straight back to the farmhouse and found Nick and my aunt and uncle sitting at the kitchen table. I asked Nick if he had been outside calling to me, and he laughed and said, "I've been here for hours, mate." Both my aunt and uncle confirmed this. To this day, I have no explanation as to who or what that thing in the horse stall was, but it's a memory I'll never, ever forget.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. The Cabin Entity.
On January of 2014, my former best friend Samantha invited me and 6 others to come stay at a rental cabin for her birthday. The cabin had 2 stories with 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms with a jacuzzi on the outside porch, so we had plenty of space. After pizza and cake, we all went outside to hang out and make talk for a while. So after about 1 hour goes by, we all go back inside. However, this time, upon entering the cabin, it felt different. Everything in my body was telling me not to be there, and I started to feel sick. There was a sinister presence lurking in our midst, circling us like vultures. I tried my best to ignore it, brushing it off as an overactive imagination. Everything was fine until the lights in the upstairs hallway suddenly went out. We were all in a group and none of us were physically close enough to the light switch to flip it. I noticed that my friend Alyssa was acting strange ever since we got back inside. She must have also felt the same dreadful presence that I did. Alyssa ended up calling her mother to come pick her up early. I never talked to her about why exactly she left that night, but the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Alyssa's departure sort of broke the party's momentum, and everybody began to feel very uncomfortable. One by one, the other guests started to leave until it was only me, Samantha, and our mutual friend Chloe. While we were there alone, loud scratching sounds and random thuds began to echo throughout the old cabin. We went downstairs to see if maybe Samantha's father was messing with us, but no one was there. We decided to brush off the strange occurrences. It wasn't until about 3 o'clock a.m. we decided to head back upstairs and try to get some sleep. When we got to the top of the steps, we froze with absolute terror. A dark, thin black figure stood at the end of the hallway, and then, just as fast as it appeared, it disappeared into thin air right in front of us. We all screamed at the top of our lungs and ran into the bedroom, locking the door behind us. For some inexplicable reason, we still didn't take the hint and get the hell out of there. We grabbed some pillows and blankets and decided to sleep in the same bed, thinking that it wouldn't come for us if we were all together. Despite the unsettling feeling I had, I was still exhausted, so I ended up dozing off. But after about 5 minutes, I woke up to hear a low, menacing growl coming from the foot of the bed. I had gotten chills from head to toe. All I could do was lay there and pray that nothing would happen to us. I kept thinking, just ignore it and it will go away. I kept coaching myself to go back to sleep, but 10 minutes later, I hear the loudest growl I've ever heard in my entire life. The growl was loud enough to wake up everyone. That's when we made up our minds to get the hell out of there. We suddenly smelled a putrid stench, like a mixture of rotten eggs and sulfur. At this point, we had enough, and we decided to flee the cabin and never return. To this day, I still get chills whenever I talk about that night. I'm just happy we all made it out safely.